I can't even tell you how many people die because I lost count. I could not believe how horrible Emma is at observational skills. We need more great characters that lean her way rather than those that are just senselessly horrible people. It just doesn't make sense to me. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and because I have been reading so many books this month, whether it be through audiobook, digital, or a physical copy, I have decided to discuss my August wrap-ups in two parts, and this is part one. The first book that I finished in August was actually Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. This is a horror dystopia novel with lots of LGBT plus representation, but because I did most of my reading in July for this book, I added it to my July wrap-up, and if you're interested in my thoughts and feelings about this book, I will put a link in the description to the video so you can check it out. So the first book that I actually started and finished in August was Buried in a Good Book by Tamara Barry. This is not her first book. Barry has published a paranormal cozy mystery series as well as some romance, I believe, but this is the first in her new By the Book Mysteries series, and the second installment comes out in a couple months. It's called On Spine of Death. I have been approved for the Netgalley ARCs, so I am very, very excited because I had such a good time with this book. It follows Tess Harrow. She is a method thriller writer, which means in order for her to complete her writing process, for her to gain inspiration, she must participate in acts or events that would mirror the events that go on for her Detective Gonzalez. And that is why, because she is delayed in her next deadline, she's behind on schedule, she takes her teenage daughter and they go off for a month to the cabin that her grandfather had left her after he passed. And it is in the middle of nowhere, just outside this very tiny town of Winthrop, Washington. And there is no Wi-Fi, there is no running water, and of course her teenage daughter Gertie is not pleased. But things immediately get super interesting. I want to say in the first chapter, they come across this lake on their property and someone is illegally participating in dynamite fishing, where you literally just have dynamite in a lake and the explosions have it raining fish, and then that's your bounty. But when this suspicious character is doing that, more than just fish fly out of the lake, body parts do, and they are raining down on Tess and her daughter, and she is literally in the middle of the investigation from then on. She and the sheriff have a really interesting tension, and I really like the chemistry that's going on there. It's really quite funny and becomes metafiction when we meet the sheriff, because he is similar physically in so many ways to Tess's fictional Detective Gonzalez, but he is very different when it comes to following protocol and believing in the process that is detecting. He doesn't want any of the craziness or drama that involves Detective Gonzalez in Tess's books, and they just are at odds all the time, but they do find some type of understanding as the investigation goes along with this body of a woman without any identification, of course. And on top of that, this isn't the only mystery that's going on in this book. We have these strange Bigfoot sightings, and it's just this man in a Bigfoot costume, but no one can ever catch him as he's running through the woods. Exotic animals are popping up and disappearing as if they've never been there, and it's just a wild ride. Like, this was the funnest, weirdest cozy mystery I've ever read, but it was perfect amounts strange and grounding, especially when we're involving ourselves in Tess's family life and the issues that she's trying to get over while living outside Winthrop and working on her next novel. I really loved her relationship with her daughter, and I just really appreciated the family aspect within this community and the quirkiness. And the ending is quite radical and crazy, but I do think it matches the tone of the entire book. So because I was already on this ride and I already accepted so many other crazy things along the way, when the reveal happened, I was like, this might as well happen. We might as well have this type of solution before us. So I highly recommend Buried in a Good Book. I'm really looking forward to book 2 and other books later on. And I ended up giving it 5 stars. It was great. And I highly recommend the audiobook, which is what I listened to. And because I loved it so much, I then went to the store and bought myself a physical copy to keep and read again later on. The next book that I ended up finishing in August was The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. If you recognize that author's name, it's likely in a very different context. He was a well-known children's literature author. He created well-loved characters like Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Eeyore, Piglet, the rest. So it's probably a bit strange for some to now associate him with detective fiction, but he was a well-known mystery critic, and he wrote The Red House Mystery sort of as an example of how he thought a mystery book should be executed. So it's really fun to see it as a time capsule when it comes to the blooming popularity of detective fiction during the time, because he wrote it in 1922. For context, we got Agatha Christie's first mystery novel in 1920, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was writing Sherlock Holmes back in the late 19th century. So it was still quite new, but obviously growing in popularity a significant amount. So with The Red House Mystery, this is more of a howdunit than it is a whodunit, which I absolutely love because that's a trope that doesn't often get used in the mystery genre very, very frequently. We have examples like Donna Tartt's The Secret History. That's a great, more modern example of the howdunit, but you just don't see it very often, and I love the chance to see how authors like to play that in. So because it's a howdunit, we know who the person is quite early on. At least our detective, Anthony Gillingham, he feels very certain that he knows who the culprit is, but he doesn't know how the person did it or really their reasoning for doing this. And it's set at Red House. This is a country estate mystery. We have many characters, and one of them is the owner himself, Mark Ablett. He becomes very agitated and frustrated at breakfast one day when he discovers a letter from his long-estranged brother, Robert, saying, "I am returning from Australia. I am going to be visiting you. Expect me." And apparently Robert hasn't been back in England for many, many years. Many of Mark's closest friends don't even really know who Robert is, or they didn't know he existed because Mark doesn't really talk about him. So when the crime happens, Mark and Robert are in Mark's office, and the door is locked from the inside, but people are hearing loud voices, potentially an argument, there's shots, and no one can get into the room. But of course, Anthony, our detective, happens to be strolling by. He's gonna stop by to visit a friend, Bill, who is visiting the estate as well. And he comes upon the scene to try to help get into the room. When they finally get into the room, they discover a body on the floor. When it's turned over, it is confirmed that it's Robert, Mark's brother, and Mark is nowhere to be found. So now we're wondering, where did he go? Why did he run? Could this have been self-defense? If so, again, why isn't he there to explain himself? So there are so many different mysteries going on, but my favorite parts were the fact that Anthony has his friend Bill assist him in uncovering the solution to this mystery, and they often like to reference themselves to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. So it's a hugely playful and humorous novel, along with obviously trying to solve the mystery at hand. But I really had a lot of fun with the humorous metafiction going on, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for a howdunit. But I'm not gonna go into who they ended up deciding was the culprit about 25% in, because I think it's fun to have a few mysteries along the way before you open a mystery book. It was a 4-star listen for me, and eventually if I can find like a cute old cover book, you know, from like a secondhand store, I'm definitely going to be adding it to my collection. The next book that I finished in August was In A Cornfield by Adam Cesare. I am likely saying his name wrong, and I'm so sorry, but this is a YA horror novel, and it's apparently the first in what's becoming a series. The second book is coming out in the next couple months, which is perfect for spooky, scary season, and I will likely not read it, because I would rather just believe that the characters who survived in this book one are experiencing lots and lots of therapy as they live long, long lives. So I'm gonna pretend that book two doesn't exist. Moving on. In In A Cornfield, to be expected, there is a killer clown, and it's occurring mainly in a cornfield. But to backtrack a bit, our main character is Quinn. She is originally from Philadelphia, but when her mom dies, her father just can't cope and he needs a change in scenery. And he's offered this opportunity to take over this general practice in a very small town down south. I want to say it was in Missouri, but I honestly can't remember, but it is like Bible Belt country, a very rural community, if you get the gist of that. So they move down there, but they have no idea what they're getting themselves into because this town is pretty much about to collapse or explode. There was a tragic accident the year before where a child died, and then the owner of this factory that pretty much gave everyone jobs and was the heart and soul of their commerce, he closes it down, and so the entire town is just really strung out and struggling. And on top of that, there's this growing tension between the generations. So there's the boomers, and then there's the Gen Zs, and they just cannot get along on anything, and it's just a battleground. That's really the only way I can describe it. So when Quinn and her father get to town, Quinn just finds herself making friends with the cool kids, and they all have decided to plan this huge, big party in the middle of a cornfield, and it's owned by this family who's off on vacation, so they know it's going to be secluded, and it's just going to be this great time. But when they get there, just all hell breaks loose. There is, as I said, a literal killer clown killing everyone, and Adam Cesare does not hold back on the descriptions. I absolutely adored this book though, because it gave me all of the Scream vibes. So if you're really interested or adore the Scream franchise as I do, this just literally reminded me of that so much, and I was totally here for it. And there's just a lot of death. Like, I can't even tell you how many people die because I lost count. So if you are ready for a high body count when it comes to just crazy deaths, pick up this book. It's a really wild ride. It was so fun. I think I read it in 2 days. And as I said, I am very satisfied with the ending. And I cannot imagine reading the second book because I've heard that the survivors cannot be counted on to survive again. And that just, I can't cope. I refuse to cope. It's not happening. But I gave it 4 stars. No, I didn't. I gave it 5 stars because of how good it was. Yeah, this was a 5-star book, totally. The third audiobook that I have finished thus far in August is Magic Lies and Deadly Pies by Misha Pop. This is a new magical realism cozy mystery series that's called Pies Before Guys. I loved the audiobook so much that yes, I did end up buying a physical copy after finishing it, and I have to give as much praise as possible to the voice actor for this audiobook. She is the same voice actor for Buried in a Good Book, and it blew my mind when I discovered that, because as I was listening, I thought, I recognize this voice. Could this be the same woman? And it was. Her name is Tanya Eby. I'll put her name down here so that you can write it down, go check out the other books that she has read aloud, and I fully intend to do the same, because while the books were great in their own right, she definitely enhanced it and added so much life to the characters' dialogue that I can't recommend her enough. To get back to the actual narrative, we follow Daisy. She is the last in line at the moment in a long line of Ellery women who have the ability to infuse magic into their careers, I suppose you can say, because her mother infused magic into her hair salon. With every hairstyle or haircut she did, she applied magic to the women she worked with. Her grandmother was a seamstress and applied magic into every stitch that she created, whether it be for a dress or a skirt, anything of the like. And then her great-grandmother, I believe, was a floral arrangement person. So with every floral arrangement, she infused some type of magic into it. To give more examples, more specific examples, Daisy can infuse her pies with a feeling of calm. So when the person eats said pie, their anxiety will lower for a brief period of time. She may also infuse it with the need to tell the truth or be honest, or energy if someone needs to get that zip that they're lacking at the moment. One darker aspect of her magic, however, is that she can sometimes infuse death into her pies, and it kills the person that it's specifically made for. And she uses this magic to help women who are in situations that they just can't get out of when it comes to domestic violence and abuse. She has this very strict protocol and certain channels that must be followed in order for her to actually complete a murder pie order. But when she does, she has killed people. Like, she literally has had victims that she has been assigned and requested by the woman who is being abused to fix the situation. And sometimes that situation is fixed by killing him. I adore the fact that we have a proper gray character. Too often, gray characters are glorified for horrible, terrible things, acts of violence that have no solid reason for why they were done, and I hate that. I prefer gray characters that simply have a moral compass that's very different from the general public, and Daisy's the perfect example of that. She has a very strict, reasonable belief in what's right and wrong, and she has sense enough to follow certain rules that allow her to proceed in this way. So I really like that, and I think that we need more gray characters that lean her way rather than those that are just senselessly horrible people. It just doesn't make sense to me. So because Daisy has this very secret side job that only a small network of women know, she is very startled when she realizes that she has a blackmailer. Someone is sending her notes, observing her from afar, saying that they know what she's done and they can prove it or they'll out her if she doesn't provide them with 3 murder pies for 3 innocent women. And of course, this is totally against Daisy's own moral code, and she's desperate to find out who this blackmailer is before she may have to fill these orders and kill these women that she doesn't even know. I really enjoyed this tension and this different type of mystery in itself, because, you know, it's not a dead body, it's not a theft, it's someone who is blackmailing our main character, our heroine, for the acts that could put her in jail and potentially, you know, apply the death penalty. Who knows? Like, there is some crazy stuff that the US still does. And again, I'm not saying that what Daisy does is right when she's killing people, but we do find ourselves rooting for her, and we want her to succeed in finding that blackmailer because we don't want anything to happen to her. I really enjoyed the subplots that went along too. I loved the characters that had their own issues going on that either Daisy was assisting in or was somehow intertwined in their own drama. There is an interesting love triangle, and I really enjoyed the romantic moments, and I'm interested to see how they progress in later books. But I think I'm really happy with who she ended up with, and the other person ended up having a lot of problematic things going on with them, so I'm glad that Daisy ended up choosing the path of less resistance on that one, but I will say no more. This was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely adored it. Get the audiobook if you can, or honestly, see if this book is at your local library, or if you already had it on your shelves because you knew that it was something for you. Highly recommend. The final book that I finished thus far in August was Emma by Jane Austen. I started this in July because I was participating in Jane Austen in July, but this is a pretty chunky book, just over 500 pages for my copy, and I enjoyed it, but there were moments of tedium that I just was struggling to get through. I'm really grateful that I made the decision to listen to the audiobook while flipping through because it pushed me through those slower parts. There is lots of drama and scandal that does go on, but you know, of course, there's those sections between the newest crazy thing happening that I was like, okay, let's go. I really enjoyed Emma as a character, and I think it helped that I had read The Murder of Mr. Wickham ahead of this. It was a Netgalley ARC that I absolutely enjoyed to the full, and it featured all of the Jane Austen heroines involved in a murder mystery. It was super fun, and I really wanted to get to know Emma a little bit better. So that encouraged me to pick this book up, and of course it helped that I owned it. I don't own any other Jane Austens that I haven't read yet, so this was obviously the really only choice I wanted to make. But Emma is a very interesting character because I enjoyed her wit so much. Her quick dialogue, whether it be between Mr. Knightley or one of the other characters, was very fun. There's a lot of humor in this, especially regarding Emma's father and Mrs. Bates, this other character who just can't stop with the word vomiting. She always has these like multiple page length exclamations of nonsense talk, and I really enjoyed how funny it was to observe these characters through Emma's eyes as well as other characters. The one thing I will note, and I think this is because I tend to read mysteries, that's the genre that I'm most comfortable with, I could not believe how horrible Emma is at observational skills. She is just so bad. How can she just be so intelligent and thoughtful and funny? But she literally is the worst version of Sherlock Holmes I have ever seen in my life. I enjoyed how humorous it was, especially since she seemed oftentimes to be the last person to expect a certain coupling to happen. But it obviously ended up having some detrimental, I guess, conflicts that arose from her horrible matchmaking skills, especially for her friend Harriet. I felt so bad for Harriet, and it definitely felt like a very easy ending in which nobody got hurt. Everything happened the way it should, but obviously that was Jane Austen's doing so that Emma could have like the happily ever after that she wanted, but it definitely didn't feel super believable, especially because of the classism going on and the importance on reputation and social cues. So I didn't fully believe it, I suppose, and I'd be interested to see what adaptations do, especially with Harriet's storyline and how her storyline comes to a close. It was a solid book. I'm really happy I ended up reading it, but reading it allowed me to realize that I liked Sense and Sensibility way more. I think I gave Sense and Sensibility 3 stars originally, but I went back onto my rankings in Goodreads and Storygraph, and I gave it 4 stars to correct because I'm going to give Emma 3 stars. So it is definitely a great classic. I'm pleased with it, and I think that 3 stars makes sense for me and my own preference when it comes to classics. I don't often give them much higher. If I'm giving them a 4 or 5 star, then they have to be just phenomenal for me and what I want out of classics. But this was a good book. I think the next Jane Austen that I really want to tackle is Northanger Abbey. I think I'll enjoy that because it's kind of described as a romance satire, and that just seems more up my alley than what this did. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the books that I've read. Have you read them? Do you have similar feelings? Or did you have very different feelings from me? I intend to do an August wrap-up part 2 later on in the month, and hopefully I did the right thing by spreading it out and having one video for the first half and one video for the second. If you enjoyed yourselves, give the video a like, consider subscribing, comment down below because I love to have conversations in the comments, and I hope everyone has a great day and a great rest of your August reading month. I'll see you in the next one.